ram in good shape, fit shape, okay? A lot of fellas will talk about having the ram fat, right? The ram fit as well, all right? So at mating time, you want to have them fit and ready to go. So when do you need to have a look at them? Now. Say you're going for October the 1st mating, right? Now is the time you need to be thinking about them and have them checked out, all right? And give them a good check over now, as we're going to have a look at here now in a minute. And then maybe again you should have another look at them a week or two before letting them out to see have you sorted out any issues that might have been there. The reason you need to have a look at them now is you need this 10 weeks to have a good time period, okay, or lag period to sort out any problems, okay. So when they talk about looking at the ram, I'll look at them in detail in a minute, okay. But the first thing is this: they do talk about 5 T's, all right. And if you just get this into your head, 5 T's, all right. Maybe 6 today, thunder, but 5. First one, as I said, is timing, all right. When to do the test on them or examination, okay, physical check, all right. So I've said to you, give yourself the 10 weeks. If he's underweight, okay, and rams do be underweight a lot of the time, all right. So if you want him at a condition score of 3.5 to 4 when you let him out, all right. So say he's at 2.5 now, you will need your 8 to 10 weeks to sort him out, all right. So that's the first point, all right. So condition score him and see what shape he's in. If he is thin, you may think about giving him a bit of protein as well, all right. A little bit of protein going into a ram, okay, will increase his fertility generally, all right. Now, not to overdo it, all right. So if we go in here and have a look at him, and we'll go through the rest of the T's as I'm doing it, all right. Okay, take any of them, I suppose. That left 5 ones. Okay, so don't knock on me at the Francis now. The first thing is to have a good look over them, all right? Okay, so I mentioned the timing, all right? The next thing is what sometimes they do talk about the torso, okay? Torso or tone, and that means having a good look over the whole body, all right? And I suppose start at the top, okay? The head, all right? So the first thing to look at the head, no abscesses or any sort of infections or sores or cuts or fighting injuries, anything like that on the head region or maybe on the shoulder. Have a good look now if you're buying a ram, and you have a good look at them to make sure that there's no, there is a couple of diseases you want to be aware out there, but they're not a huge problem, but there is a couple of diseases you could buy in on the ram, okay. So make sure he's totally clear of any infections on the head. The other thing is have a good look at the eye, all right. Simple thing to have a look at the eye, a nice clear eye, okay. Again, no infections in the eye. And problems in the eyes can be inherited too to some degree, all right. So a clear eye. The other thing would be, you know, that he's not anemic, okay. And you'd be hoping when you buy a ram that he wouldn't be anemic. So the membranes in the eye wouldn't be too pale, all right. Okay, so you'd have a look at the eye there, membranes there, and white, all right. Okay. So that's the eye, okay. No infections, no even any signs of any scabs or anything, you know, anything like that at all could be a sign that there was arf around the place. So it's that as well. And a bit of crust could fall off again, and you have it, okay. So tone, okay, refers right, as I say, a condition score 3.5 to 4, all right, when you let them out, okay. Same idea with the ewes, if we come into that again, all right. Those that are in the pedigree and the sided breeding, okay, will know. Make sure he's standing fairly well, all right. Now I'm going to go into the different characteristics of different breeds, but make sure he's standing fairly right. Make sure he's standing on the feet fairly evenly. That he's not standing too far back on his hock, lying back that way, we'll say. All right, don't want him that way, and you don't want them sitting up on the top of his toes either, all right. So, okay, like that lad is there now, all right. Okay, good feet, especially on the ram, all right. Okay, now that's a general look over them, alright? No problems there. Uh, the next thing would be the teeth, alright? Now, when you let out a ram, he's going to be in action maybe for 7 weeks, right? Food isn't going to be a big issue, or feed in his mind, alright? So you want to make sure the dentures are fairly good, alright? If any bite that he goes to get, that he takes it in, alright? More on probably with an older ram, alright? Make sure that there's no incisors, the front teeth, not too sharp, gone too long, and again, that'd be mainly a problem with the older ram. Make sure that the teeth, okay, most people are looking for this anyways, okay, make sure that the teeth, this fella is only putting up teeth here now, okay, but make sure that the teeth meet on the dental pad evenly, alright? Make sure he's not what I call a hog or a parrot mouth, okay? He's out that way, or he's that way, alright? Okay, make sure that the meat, alright? And that might, as the ram gets, may show up, so when you're getting a young ram, make sure that's right. And then you should, the teeth, fellas, don't do it is maybe the teeth along the sides, okay, the big teeth, the molars at the back, alright? Run your hands down along the sides there, again with an older ram, alright? And make sure there's no lumps or abscesses there, alright? Or even sharp teeth, alright? Sharp teeth will cause ulcers or even abscesses, okay? So a simple thing, run your hands down the jaws there each side, okay? Alright? Okay, so that's 2 T's. 3, timing, tone, and the teeth, alright? Okay, the next thing would be to have a look at would be the equipment, alright? Testicles, alright? I see smiles already up here. Okay, there's going to be a lot of smiles here in a minute. Okay, the first thing to do, we'll do this here without turning them over at all first, and we can have a quick look when we do turn them over. Okay, the testicles, okay, when you feel the testicles, alright, they should feel firm, alright, not spongy, alright, and not soft, okay. So a good guide for when you put your hands on the testicles is that part of your hand there. Press that, close your fists, close that part of your hand, and press there. That's the sort of feeling that should be on the testicles. Or there, your biceps. That's the sort of feeling that should be on the testicles, alright? So your hands up and down along each side, alright? Okay. For any lumps, okay. And we'll have a look for any injuries in a minute, alright? So, will we turn them, Francis? We'll be able to explain it a bit better, alright? Okay. Now, this is what we're over here too long. Okay, just you run your hands down here. And this is another point too with the rams. Size counts here. Alright? So, whatever you hear otherwise, but with the sheep anyways, size definitely counts. Okay. Generally that you talk about maybe 300 on a hogget lamb, maybe 300 millimeters of a circumference around the widest part of the scrotum here, alright? And a mature ram, depends on the breed of course, but a mature ram maybe 340. So the bigger the better here. The other thing of course coming into the mating season at this time of the year, all this area around here should appear more flushed as the hormones start to work in his system, okay? So all this area around here should appear more flushed. The other check here would be down here at the bottom, at the very bottom of the scrotum, okay, there's 2 little packets, we'll call them, the epididymis they call them, okay, and that's where the semen is actually stored, alright, and that should have a rubbery consistency, okay, again not rock hard and not pure soft, a rubbery sort of tone to it, alright, and it should be a reasonable size as well. If you can, maybe the size of a golf ball. So it's really a little ball under the ball. All right, if I put it crudely. All right, okay. That is important, okay, because when you, again coming back to the timing side, when you let out a ram, all right, when will most of your ewes be tipped? First 2 to 3 weeks. When is that semen produced or sperm produced? It's produced 4 to 5 weeks before you let him out. All right. So the semen that's actually going to be used for fertilizing the ewe, there's about a 7-week gap. So that's the importance again of the timing. All right. Okay. The other thing would be, again, on the physical side of it, an obvious thing would be to check the brisket there. All right, to make sure that there's no, especially if you're using something like a harness the previous year, any abscesses or scratches there, that's nice and clean. All right. No infections there, and if there is infections there at the start, look, they're going to get a lot worse as the mating season goes on. Okay, the other thing then would be to look around. Show a bit of this area here. Okay, the prepustical. Make sure that there's no infections, again, ulcers or any such abscesses around that area. And if there are, look at there is a risk maybe that he'll get worse as the mating season goes on, or it'll be spread to the ewes. Okay. The other thing then, if you can do it, maybe would be to have an actual physically look at the penis. All right. Now, sometimes it's hard enough to do it, and in a lot of rams, it's easy enough to do it. Okay. So what you need to do is, if you can, expose it here. All right. Okay. All right. Now, can you see that there? You probably can see it on the screen a bit better. It's probably your best chance ever maybe to see it on the screen. All right. Okay. Make sure that there is no any abscess or any sort of infection or any severe redness around the area. Okay. Now, do you see the one check you could do there is, do you see the little worm-like thing there on the top of the penis? Can you see it in the I can. Okay. Okay. That's called the vermiform appendix. It's peculiar to sheep, all right? If you're having a look, and if you get a chance and buying a ram, it'd be better if it's there, okay? He's not infertile or anything if it's not there, all right? But sometimes that goes missing, all right? Here, it's like a little worm. Rams that might have got injured, got caught in something, quite often maybe that might fall off, or if you had kidney stones or calculi stones, all right? Sometimes it gets lodged there, all right? So that would, and look, it's no big sin if it's missing, okay? All right? What it's there for, we're not really 100% sure, all right? But when the important moment happens, we'll say, when he fertilizes or inseminates the ewe, that little worm structure sort of revolves around at speed, they reckon, all right? And, well, if in the eye situation, they'd spot that. And remember that the cervix of the ewe is very tight, okay? So that's why eyeing in sheep is so difficult, all right? So, I suppose it is an advantage if the semen is just deposited all the way around the cervix. Now, this is just kind of an opinion. There's no science behind it, but it's probably better if it's sprayed around, rather than all deposited maybe just at one spot. Okay? Now, that's the testicles and that piece of equipment, all right? The last one, the last T I'll talk about will be the toes, all right? I sort of left the toes last here because I don't want to be dirty my hands. But make sure you check the feet, all right? You'll spot it probably when you're standing anyways if there's any problem with the feet, toes. Make sure that there's no foot rot, obvious stuff like that. Make sure there's no growth maybe inside between the hoofs. You'd see it in some breeds, might be a bit more prone to it, okay. And maybe on the hoof, just to see, is it hot or too hot, or is there any infection there? All right, oh, you let him off, Francis, he's okay. Okay, so that's the 5 T's. I think I've got them all. Yeah, and if you go through them, you should have a better ram at mating time, because if you don't look at all them different aspects and try and sort them out or spot the problem, and then if there is problems, you have a chance to go and get a new ram. Remember, when you're buying in a ram too, you want them on the place for a couple of weeks, maybe 6 or 8 weeks ideally, but you know, you should be quarantined, we'll say, for a minimum of 4 weeks in the place. It's no good going out and looking for a ram a week or two before you need them. All right. Some places they would suggest, as I said, this idea of having a ram stuck in a paddock or even a pen and feeding concentrates for a month or two before mating, he's going to get fat, he's going to have condition on him, but is he going to be fit? This fella's going for the Olympics, all right? And they're going to be tough Olympics for 6 weeks, we'll say. So he wants to be fit, all right? And some places that actually suggest maybe if you have him in a pen by himself and you're going to give him a small bit of meal, maybe have the trough, one end and maybe have another trough at the other end. Have him walking up and down. Or even, some people suggest even that maybe a gentle stroll with the dog every day with him, all right? Have him fit, all right? Now, I don't mean that the dog out with him, all right? Yeah, I see some of you looking at me, all right? Okay. Some people would say just if he's along by a paddock by the road or something, that he follow the jeep up and down along as you go down, as long as he's fit, all right? Okay. So that's, I think, the main physical stuff on the ram. If he's fit, I reckon that he could be worth 3 or 4 euros at least extra per lamb, or you'd save 3 or 4 euros on the ram cost if he's fit. Yeah, I won't ask you what ratio you think you should have for a ram per ewe. People talk about 40, 50. If you had everything right, good and perfect, I don't know what I should say to you or not. Some of you will probably go home and do it, but I don't want you to do it. A ram could do 80 ewes, 100 ewes, all right, if he's in good shape. He has the capacity to do that, providing all them things I said were all right. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that. And
okay. Thanks, Eamon. Thank you very much, and thanks. And just thank Francis Bly as well for helping there with the rams in the pen. Just while we're letting out the 2 rams there and getting ready to have Stephen Patton come in, if anybody has any urgent question that you want to put to Eamon at this stage, we can take 1 or 2 if anyone wants to ask anything about it. If we don't, we have Stephen Patton coming next to give us an indication of the Sheep Ireland and the lamb indices. So. Any question? Well, okay, sorry, yeah, hang on a sec now.
Eamon, on your last tee there, the growth between the toes, if you did come across it, what do you do about it if you've paid big price for a ram? Is there a ways of...
Well, I talked a bit. Some people just rip it out, but you could have a lot of bleeding, you know. A lot of blood in there. So if you thought it might be going to cause irritation, I'd just get the vet to have a look at it.
Maybe just on that as well, in relation to lameness issues, we'll have Fergal Morris will be addressing the issue later on. So if you want any questions, particularly on lameness, or on disease, you know, abortion diseases for sheep, we can leave them later, but I'll take your question, but thank you.
Okay, right,
any other question?
The one thing there I said about looking at the penis there, sometimes I said it's difficult to actually get the equipment out. Don't go forcing it, okay? Leave them alone if you can. It's not critical. It's just an extra check you could do if it's handy.
And just maybe a quick comment on it, I suppose. It's very frequent that, like most of the checks that Eamon did even there while the sheep were standing, most farmers don't even do that when they're buying a ram. They'll go in and they'll see a ram tied at a gate in a mart, or they'll see him running in the field. And a few simple checks, it'll only take 3 or 4 minutes, and you'll have an awful lot of checks done, and it could save you an awful lot of headaches later on. But look, thank you very much, Eamon, for that. At this stage, we're going to move over to Stephen Potterton. Stephen works with Sheep Ireland, and I suppose a lot of you in this part of the world will be familiar with the sheep indexes, and Stephen will give us, I suppose, an outline of the importance and what the new indices are all about. Thank you very much.
Yeah, as Frank said, I'm from Sheep Ireland. Suppose just to give you a quick background there in Sheep Ireland, we're just set up to help improve the genetics of the national sleep flock. So we're doing this by through recording and offering recording service for pedigree breeders and who record it, and then based on their recordings we give indices. So a few slides there. Yeah, sorry. So basically, the idea of Sheep Ireland is to highlight the better genetics in the ram breeding and the sheep industry in Ireland, and then to get these genetics back into the main population of the sheep, and then help increase the quality of the flock. So the importance of genetics is permanent and cumulative. So once you introduce good genes onto your farm, they're there forever and they can be built on. And same with bad genetics. Once you introduce bad genetics onto your flock, they're very hard, or it's very difficult to manage those bad genetics out of the flock. So the whole idea of Sheep Ireland is to identify the best genetics and get them used. And we do this through 3 different ways. We have a pedigree recording service called Lam Plus. So in Lam Plus, we have 500 pedigree breeders, and they record a lot of data. They record birth data, they record weights during the year, and from all this data they recorded, they get evaluations at the end. And these evaluations are the stars that you will have to be picking rams for your STAP. So to validate all this data, we have 5,000 commercial ewes as well. We have a Malt project with 3,000 ewes and a central progeny test with 2,000 ewes. So those 5,000 ewes use rams from the pedigree breeders from those 500 flocks. So all that information from the commercial flocks feedbacks into the pedigree data, and it actually, what it really does help with is increases the accuracies and the quality of the data and the recordings, so you can put a lot of faith into the indexes. So basically, for this year, we have 2 indexes. We have, for the Irish sheep breeder, you either breed ewes for replacements or you breed rams to go to the factory. So we've split the index into 2. So we have a replacement index and we have a terminal index. And basically, we give the stars based, and all the information that's recorded goes into either of those indexes. So a lot of weights and lambing data would go into our terminal index, and then into the replacement index, the ewe's mothering ability and her milk ability and her ability to get rid of lambs early. So I suppose I'm just giving a quick rundown. When we're using the Eurostars for purchasing a ram, it's basically broken into 5 stars. It's just like a hotel. 5 stars the best, 1 star is the worst. So if you're buying a 1-star ram, he's in the bottom 20%, and if you're 5-star, he's in the top 20%. So we just have an example of the catalogue there. So this is the example of the catalogue that you'll see at a lot of the sales this year. There'll be, at all the Premier sales and most of the society sales around the country this year, there will be a majority of rams will have the stars. So for the STAP, the stars have to be a 3-star or over in either the replacement or the terminal index. So these stars will be available and they'll be in the catalogues for the Premier sales. So, and just an example of what our commercial flocks help us with. The difference in weaning weights between a 5-star and a 1-star, suppose, so the difference on the ground. The average difference is about 4 kilos difference at weaning. Sorry, there's another button there. So there's a 4 kilo difference at weaning time between a 5-star and a 1-star ram. So I suppose, and that's where a lot of the commercial recording that we're doing around in our 5,000 flocks goes into a lot of those weights, and it helps back up the data. So I suppose it's just to show on the ground that the 5-star, he's 4 kilos heavier. He'll be gone nearly 4 weeks earlier than the 1-star rams from your flock. So that's basically it on the slides. I suppose what we have here is 2 rams. You just have an example of a catalogue there I was given out. We have a ram here in the corner. He's an old stock ram. He's the top ram there on the catalogue sheet. So he is 5-star for replacement and 5-star for terminal index. And if you just look out under the index, you'll see he's the top 12% for all the replacement, as a replacement sire in the Texel breed, and in the terminal index he's in the top 1%. So I suppose one thing to keep into mind there is the accuracy levels. He has an accuracy of 44% to 46%. So we'd say an accuracy from 40% up is good. We'd say accuracy up from 15 to 25 is poor, and 25 to 40 would be medium. but anything over 40 would be a good accuracy. So it is something to keep in mind if you're buying a ram at a sale and he's only a 15 or a 20% accuracy, that those stars might change. And I suppose one thing to say is that the ram NCT and your choice of ram, your choice has to be visual first. You have to like the ram, you have to do all your checks that Eamon did, and make sure he's up to standards. And then after you've checked everything is up to standard, I suppose that's where the stars come into place. So we've 2 rams in front of us here. So there's not much difference between them. They're 2 good rams, they've 2 good back ends, they're nice and long. And I suppose if you were at a sale, would you know the difference in the genetics between them? Would anybody here know which one was the 5-star and which one was the 1-star? No. Well, ram here, number 59, sorry, is he's only a 1-star ram. So you can see visually very much the same as the other fella. He's long, he's good legs, he's nice back end on him, but he's only a 1-star. He's a 1-star replacement and 2-star for terminal. So basically he is he's in the bottom 30% of the rams. But I suppose the main difference is that you're looking at the 2 of them and they look the same, but it's the genetics that goes into them and it's in behind them is what the thing is. So if you're looking to choose a ram for breeding replacements or breeding terminal sires, we have lamb number 58 that Michael was holding there. This fella here, he's a 5-star for replacement and 5-star for terminal. He's in the top 1% of the replacement rams with replacement stars. So basically what we'd be saying about him is he'd be a good ram for breeding replacement females, and then in the terminal index he's in the top 3%, so he's also a good ram for going to the factory. Now it's kind of rare that you get the 2 of them on the same ram, but I suppose it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for replacement or terminal, he'd actually probably tick both boxes there in his 5 stars. So I suppose just basically is that the difference in the rams, you can't tell by eye, but the genetics and the information that goes into making it up is an extra tool, and the stars is an extra tool to help you decide. And I suppose just for the STAP, there's plenty of sales around, and all the rams will have the figures. And just one thing to keep in mind would be the accuracy. Suppose an accuracy would above 25% would be an average accuracy, but accuracy above 40% at present for a ram lamb would be a good accuracy for basing your choice and picking your ram on.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Have you anybody any questions for Stephen? Any question on the indices or any other feature? And I suppose when you look at just the 2 rams going out there, I suppose it does emphasise the point. You have two ram lambs there that look almost identical, and yet the statistics would show that they're quite different in terms of their genetics and in terms of their potential going forward. So I mean, I suppose the first objective that you would need to do when you're going buying a ram is you first of all take a look at the rams and you do the physical checks that Eamon had referred to earlier on. You look at the overall general appearance and you make sure you're happy with the ram. And let's say then you came down to those 2 particular rams, say I want one of those. Then you could go secondly and have a look at the actual figures that are available on them, and that will maybe give you the final edge in making the decision as to which one to go for. So thank you very much, Stephen. If there's any other questions, any questions at all for him while we're just getting set up for the next start?
So it's just quickly, just want to say that STAP eligibility, rams 3-star or over in either the terminal or the maternal index are eligible for STAP. All the society sales, the Texel, Suffolk, Charolais, Vendines and Belclair will all have stars at their sales. So, and any other society, if you ring the society, they'll be able to tell you. But we're dealing with a lot of societies at the minute doing catalogues and helping them out, so the stars are available. And I suppose there's about 10,000 rams recorded through Sheep Ireland this year. 60% of them are going to be 3-star and more, so there's great availability of rams for this year. And there is a ram search function on the Sheep Ireland website that you can go in and do it by county. So if you go into your county, select Galway and the breed, it'll bring up all the rams that are eligible for STAP for that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. And I suppose it may be just worth commenting as well at this stage, because for anybody who's involved in the STAP program, the purchasing or the having a ram, a star-rated ram, is an essential requirement for basically passing STAP. So if you had a choice of doing it in either year 1 or year 2, so if you hadn't one last year, well, you need one this year. So just make sure it's something that you get sorted on time. Thank you. Okay, at this stage, we're going to move on to the next session. Second slide. Okay, we're going to move on to the next session, and it's basically to do with selecting ewes for breeding. And we have Michael Godstein, he's ably assisted here by Noel Meehan. And so I'll hand you over to you, Michael, at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As Frank said, my name is Michael Godstein. I'm on the sheep specialist side, and Noel is going to give me a hand here. And we're just going to talk a little bit about getting ewes ready, or selecting ewes for breeding, okay? And I suppose most of the people around here, you're not going to be going to the ram unless you're early lambing flocks until probably October, or even in some cases November. And you're saying, you know, maybe this is very early again. Why are we talking about this in July? Okay, that's miles away. Some of you have just weaned your ewes, or might be just in the process of weaning your ewes. And I'll come to that and why it's important. But the first question I have for you is, you're all sheep farmers. How many people here had ewes last spring that reared bad lambs, didn't take their lambs, that you spent 20 minutes with your hand inside her trying to get lambs out of her, that had blind teats, you know, that rejected their lambs? It would be fair enough that most of you have had one or more of those kind of problems in the springtime, okay? Second question, how many of you are confident that you'd still be able to identify those ewes now, in July, having left them out, shorn them, okay? And I think by and large, what we would find is that you'll remember the ones that have mastitis because you can see it, it's there, right? You'll remember the ones that you stitched or put a harness on because they'll probably still have the marks. But a lot of the other problems that we have on the farm with ewes are very hard to identify unless you have what's on the top of that particular chart there, which is good records, okay? And I think it's very important that we keep records, and how you keep them. You can say that's fine, you know, if you're working in an office and you have a computer or you have a piece of paper and a biro beside, but when I'm in the lambing shed at 11 o'clock at night, I don't have a computer alongside me or a piece of paper and a biro. And that, you know, that's what happens most of us, isn't it? You lamb the ewe, you say, actually, I better remember her, whatever, and things are busy, and next thing she's gone out into the field and we've forgotten. And the following year she comes around, and just when you're sitting there remembering, Jesus, I did this last year, you say, Jesus, this must be the one that did the same thing to me last year. Okay? And 50% of your workload comes from 20% or 10% of your sheep. It's the same 10% if you can't identify them. So that's just the important thing about records, right? That brings me to timing and why you should do this now, okay? If you haven't got records, you're not going to be able to identify those sheep now. And maybe you need to start thinking, how am I going to identify sheep that cause me problems from now on so that I can cull them? And I think a very useful tip, most farmers will have a penknife with them, is to cut a corner off an ear tag. Okay, if you see a sheep coming up the race with a corner cut off the ear tag, she's a sheep you had to do something with her at some stage. She was lame, you know, she prolapsed, she was a poor mother, you had her in a fostering crate for a week to get her to take her lambs or whatever. But it's a useful way of basically identifying sheep that offend you. I suppose the next step on my board is the whole area of correct timing. And what we're saying there is, it takes time to get the sheep right if a sheep is wrong. And what we might do is switch over to the camera if we can, okay? And Noel might grab one of the sheep for me. And we'll do a ewe NCT, which is basically very similar to what Eamon did, only we're going to do it with a particular ewe. So maybe if we can get the camera person in here and we'll get Noel to put his back to the gate so people can see what's happening. Okay. Can you go over there? Yeah. Keep going. No, that's perfect. Okay. So this is it's about going through your ewes, right? And identifying the ones that that you need to cull, all right? Or the ones that need remedial action, and this is where the timing comes in, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the ewe to see if she's sound for breeding. So it's a general soundness examination. So this ewe is pretty thin, all right? And is there a reason why she's thin? Maybe she's thin because she had 2 super lambs, reared 2 lambs that were 37 or 8 kilograms, and she's put everything into the lambs, right? So, but I suppose one of the main reasons what we would be checking is her mouth, okay? Because that's an area where our problems could be arising. So open the mouth, have a look at the teeth. What we want with the ewe, basically, is that her teeth are meeting the pad, right? Now, I wouldn't get overly concerned whether it's a 1/4 of an inch back or a millimetre out or a millimetre in this way, right? If she's able to forage because her teeth are meeting the pad, we're happy enough. But what we want to avoid is gaps between the teeth, right? Because that's where the grass will get lodged, and sheep don't brush their teeth every night, so they lose their teeth. Okay, she loses her ability to forage. The same thing that Eamon mentioned earlier with the ram, molars are a problem, okay? You can spend a lot of time looking at the incisors, but if she has a problem here, a lump or a gap here, that's going to affect her ability to forage. You'll see it sometimes, sheep that are drooling, basically bits of green drool coming. That's very often a molar problem. An abscess, any of you ever had a tooth abscess? Very painful, right? Not something that you're thinking too much about eating if you have it, right? So what we want to do, anything sticking out there, any problem there, we're getting rid of her, all right? Because that's not going to solve itself, right? Other things that you're looking at if you're buying stock, again, that Noel mentioned, is look around the eyes, signs of entropin, you know, tears, weeping, scar tissue. Basically, entropin is an inturned eyelid, okay? And you'll see that lambs that have tears coming out of their eyes, and you have to turn the eyelid out, okay? That's a hereditary condition, so you want to avoid that in your ewes. And then the other thing that we mentioned about is around here, just anywhere where there's a lymph gland, a lump that's coming, and that's a disease called CLA, all right? And you want to, again, avoid that if you're buying in stock, or if you have it on your farm, you need to cull sheep that have that problem showing up, okay? So that's basically the mouth. We look at the feet, all right? Foot problems. Foot problems, Fergal is going to cover them later on in terms of foot rot and scald. But, you know, if you have a ewe that is repeatedly lame, right? A ewe that you're turning every 3 or 4 months because she's hobbling in, she's not going to put on condition, she's keeping that disease going in your flock. So if you have to treat a ewe more than once, really you should be considering, you know, do I need to be getting rid of her? If everything else is right on your farm, if your control procedure is correct, you've got a good foot bath, or whatever, you know, mechanisms you have, if it's not a big flock problem. Obviously, if you have a flock problem with lameness, you can't go culling everyone that's going to be lame. So look at our feet. We're not saying that you should be foot pairing ewes, okay? We're not recommending routine foot pairing of ewes, basically bringing in all the ewes, turning them all up and pairing their feet. And the reason why we're not telling you to do that is, if we turned up this ewe, and if she had a lame foot, her front right foot is lame, which is the first foot you're going to pair? This is the lame foot, and we turn it up, and let's say there's a huge amount of kind of overgrown hoof, and there's foot rot inside it. Which is the hoof I'm going to pair first when I turn the ewe? That one. And what am I going to do after I've paired that foot? I've returned up now. I'll pair the other 3, won't I? Because sure, I've returned up. Yeah? So what I'm doing now is I'm putting the foot rot from this foot onto the other 3 feet, right? Making sure it gets there. And then I'm going to turn the next sheep, and I'm going to do the same thing again. So flocks that foot pair more frequently have higher incidence of lameness. Hard to believe, but that's what the literature says, right? So what we're saying is we do pair sheep that need to be paired, but we pair them sparingly. So it's just picking out the couple of sheep that have foot problems and pairing them, but disinfecting the foot pairs between feet and between sheep, okay? So that's our feet, our head, right? Last area that we're looking at is the back end, okay? So we want to look at around the vulva area for any signs of stitching, okay? That's basically if we had a problem with prolapse that has slipped us by, okay? And then we want to look at the bag, okay, the udder. And what we're doing in the udder is basically feeling for lumps, and any hardness that's there is going to give you a reduction in milk yield. So even small lumps are a problem for us, right? So we're just feeling the udder. We're looking for lumps. We're looking for big, saggy bags, okay? Saggy bags and big teats or poorly placed teats are a problem because what happens to the ewe when she lambs down? She'll have a big bag of milk. It'll be down at the ground. And where is the lamb looking for the nipple? He's looking for the teat up high, okay? And you'll spend 2 or 3 days on your knees trying to train this fella to put his head down to suck this bag. And you'll probably end up milking it out as well because it'll get very big. So we want to get rid of those ones because those are what are costing us time. The other thing you want to do is catch the teat and just basically roll the teat in between your fingers, okay? Can you get that on the camera? You can, yeah? Okay, so what we're doing is rolling the teat between our fingers. And the reason why we're doing that is we're looking for cording, basically like the lead of a pencil or a string going up through the teat. And even though that's there and there'll be no lumps in the teat, it's going to cause a problem for her. She's not going to milk on that side, okay? So check the udder properly because that's an important part for us next year. Okay, we're doing this now in July. We've weaned the ewes. We're going through it, finding all those lumps. We've pulled out all the ewes that are right, that have good mouths, good feet. They're right in the bags. They haven't offended us, had foot rot or anything like that. And the last thing we need to do now is we need to check the body condition. So again, Noel, if you can just twist her around this way, maybe so that the camera can see her. Okay, so in terms of checking the body condition, there's 2 places that we want to look for body conditions. One is here over the ribs, okay? And the second one is here on the transverse process, okay? And what you want really is that you can't feel the bones, right? So it's not, we won't get too excited about whether this ewe is 2.5 or 2.25 or 2.75 of a body condition. We want her to be around 3.5, okay? Last year we had a great back end, okay? Ewes scanned very well, and the reason why they scanned very well is because we had a good back end and ewes put on condition. And they were in good body condition going to the ram. And people, you know, who had a lot of grass in the autumn of 2013 would have had good scans. You know, so it's important that we get them. Now this ewe is probably somewhere around 2.5. So she needs to put on somewhere around 12 kilos, 10 to 12 kilograms of body weight, right? And just to put that in context, if you had a lamb here today and he was 32 kilograms and you wanted to bring him to 45 kilograms, how long would it take you to fatten him on grass? From now? Anyone give me an answer? How long would it take you to put on 12 kgs on a lamb from now, the middle of July? Would you do 1.5 kilos a week? You know, be about the outside of it, you know, with grass, right? And the ewe is no different. So if this ewe is to put on 12 kilos on good grass, this is the grass now we're giving the lambs, she needs 8 weeks. If she's on kind of medium grass coming after the lambs, she needs 10 weeks. And this is why we're saying that the timing is critical, that you do this now, that you divide your ewe. So this ewe is thin, right? You can see it. You can see the bones sticking. It's easy to feel them, right? If we just grab maybe one of the better conditioned ewes. Okay, so this ewe is in good body condition, and I to feel a bone there, I really need to push in hard, right? Okay, and here you won't feel the ribs. You really have to put pressure on to feel the ribs. Like, okay, so that ewe is probably a 4, which is the upper end of where we want her to be, right? So what we're saying is go through your ewes now, because this ewe needs 10 weeks. This ewe doesn't need any time. She's at the right body condition. So what we need to do is we need to treat this one very well for the next 10 weeks. Make sure that she's responding, check her every now and then. Ewes that don't respond, and you'll have a percentage of ewes that are thin that won't put on body weight. You're just as well off to bang them off at that stage. Whereas this one needs to be running around after the lambs, cleaning out the paddocks for you. She's your topper, okay? And I suppose that's the message that we want to get out here today is you need time. This idea of flushing ewes for 2 or 3 weeks, you're not going to put 12 kilograms of live weight onto that ewe in 3 weeks, no matter what you give her. There isn't a ewe in the country that will do that, right, for you. So she needs time. And that's why we start now. So I suppose the take-home messages from Noel and my session is go through your ewes now because you need time, all right? The thin one certainly needs time. Once you've gone through them, check them regularly, so once every 3 or 4 weeks, go through them. Make sure that the thin ones are responding, that the fat ones aren't getting too fat, all right, because we don't want them to become grossly over fat either, but we don't want to start starving them and having them lose weight that'll take us a lot of time to put on. And lastly, once you've checked all the bags and everything, and you're happy with everything, before you go back to the ram with the ewes, just go through them one last time. And even though you've already checked their bags and you're happy that none of them have mastitis, you will have the odd ewe that will get summer mastitis. It's spread by flies. So even though she was fine when you've checked her now in July, she can get mastitis during the summer, and she'll show up with a lump maybe next October. And again, you want to identify her and get rid of her before she goes to the ram. So I don't know how I am for time, Frank. I'm probably gone a little bit over. So
we're grand for time. Thanks, Michael. That's an interesting display and an interesting discussion on the importance of checking the ewe. Does anybody want to ask any question while we're arranging the next talk? Anyone put any questions to Michael? Okay, just while we are switching over here for the next slot, maybe I just remind anybody who hasn't already signed in and registered for the STAP program that if you want to get credit for being attendant here, you need to register, and that's done in the office out next door, just for anybody who hasn't already registered. And I would just, while we're changing over, I'll emphasise one particular point, and Michael made it very well there. It's to do with the condition of the ewes. And I think if we look back what happened this spring, there was a very high lambing rate. There was a lot of lambs born per ewe put to the ram. If we look at the previous year, it was actually quite the opposite. And it would certainly be an indication that it would be to do with the condition of the ewe going to the ram. And that was due by default to a degree, that we had a lot of very good grass growth last September, October. So if you want to take the steps, I think the evidence is there for yourselves that the importance of having ewes in the proper condition going to the ram. And so it's really important to take these steps now at this stage. Thank you very much, Michael, and Noel, for that. And at this stage now, we're going to move on to another section. And I suppose the objective of all of the sheep business is to sell a product that the market wants. And if you bear with me for a moment. Where's the slide? Oh, sorry, wrong one opened. Just getting this set up here. Selecting lambs. Okay. No. Shane, do you want these slides up for a minute, or? Okay. Okay. The objective, I suppose, of any sheep enterprise is to make money, and that involves selling a product. And the main product of sheep farmers are lambs that we sell to the factory. And what's very, very important is that we know when the lambs are fit for slaughter, that we select them correctly, and we know what to expect. And I suppose year in, year out, a lot of us maybe are in a hurry trying to get rid of as many lambs as we can at one particular time. It results in oftentimes that we're selling some lambs that are maybe not fully finished, and as a result, we're taking a poorer price when we go to the factory with them. On other occasions, we're selling lambs that are overweight and overfat, and we'll be penalised. We're also producing weight that we're not actually going to get paid for at all. So, I think we can make inroads and make improvements by simply adhering to a few certain key factors, and that is maybe what's going to be addressed over the next 15 minutes by Shane McHugh. Shane has recently joined our sheep specialist team. He's from Donegal. You will all have been familiar with his uncle, who was around for a long number of years with us as a sheep specialist as well, Michael McHugh. But I'm going to hand you over to Shane at this stage to give you a discussion on the selecting lambs for slaughter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. What myself and Andy here is going to take you to, I suppose, is the important point in sheep farming is the sale of our lambs. That's basically where the money's coming in, and our selection process of that is important. What we find is, as sheep farmers, when we go to select the lambs, we either do it by, I suppose, in a batch of lambs, we draft them off and we say they're even, they're nice, away we go, hopefully they're okay. or we go by the other method, and it's just, I suppose, important to point out the weighing scales, is to actually have a weighing scale if we're drafting lambs for slaughter, that we have an idea, an exact idea. It was earlier Stephen mentioned about the rams having, you know, a bit of data on them. It's the same with the factory lambs as having weights. The important thing about the scales, that is in good working order. You might have seen myself and Andy put in the first lamb and we hadn't it set back to 0. So look, those side of things, even when you go to use your scales, most of us have some weight around the house. If it's a 25 kilo bag, 4-stone bag of meal, throw them in and see they come up 25 kilos. If it doesn't come up 25 kilos, there's probably 2 things maybe wrong. Your meal supplier has done you 2 or 3 kilos, or the scales is out. But look, most of the times it's the scales. It's just, look, a simple thing with scales is if you're transporting them, the clocks, take the clock off. The clock's very sensitive, and basically, you know, have it away from it if you're transporting it in the trailer or whatever, if you're going to an out farm. So look, to start off in the selection process, it's important we need to know what we want out of these scales, what we want when we're marking them coming out. Earlier in the year, we were happy to go with lighter weights. It was a fall in price. This talk would have been totally different 4 to 5 weeks ago when price was coming back rapidly. But we're at where we're at today, roughly around 450, 460 a kilo. It's fairly static. Don't just hold me on that. But hopefully, look, we're at that and it's not going to be major falls in it. So when we're at this, what are we looking for today? Basically, we're looking for, in a fat lamb situation, a lamb, a minimum, I would say, of 18 to 18.5 kilos, up to 21 kilos for our factory market. That's what most factory plants are on today. There may be the exception of a bit of extra weight. But it's important to point out, and a lot of the processors are coming back and saying to ourselves is, they don't want lighter lambs below 18 kilos. It's very hard to sell and market and all the rest. But I think ourselves as farmers, as sheep farmers, we can't afford to sell a lamb at 18 kilos or below it at the price we're at today. If we have that lamb at that stage, we have to move it upwards in weight to get a better return. So that's where we're aiming for as regards weight. So do we need to know what weight he is live? And Andy will maybe go through that in the lambs and what kill out we expect in them at different stages. But look, at the minute, what we're looking for, as I said, is 18 to 21 kilos in the factory sense. Or if you're going to a niche market or a butcher market, talk to your butcher, whoever you're supplying, what's the upper limit, what size do they want. And it's important, what weight do they want. It's important, you know, a lot of butchers will go up to that 50, 52 kilos, maybe a bit heavier. But a lot of them will cut off at that weight, 52, 53 kilos definitely. You don't want oversized legs either. So look, if we know, I suppose from the slide, know your weights, draft them, have them within a range, a small range. You don't want a large range, and that's if the large range will come from when you kill out, that's where you're 17 kilos and you're 22 and 23 kilos. The other thing to point out is regular drafting. Every 2 weeks from weaning on. If you're in a case or a large flock earlier in the year, I would say every week, because lambs are putting on so much weight on a weekly basis. But every 2 weeks definitely is what I would say this time of year. The problem probably arises is the first draft. We're not going in early enough in the first draft. We think there's not enough lambs ready, so there's only 6 or 7, 8 lambs ready in there. I'll leave them another fortnight. I'll get a good draft. What happens then at that stage, you push it back. Those lambs that were ready are suddenly killing out your 23, 24 kilos, where they should have been gone a number of weeks. What does that mean, I suppose? Look, number one, you're supplying something that the processors don't really want, or it's hard for them to move on. And the second thing is we're giving them free meat. And that, I suppose, look, in reality is we don't want to be doing that. We want to get paid for what we produce. We don't want to be feeding lambs or rearing lambs off grass to give free meat to somebody else. That we want to sell them at the correct weight. It's selling them at heavy weights and extra feed. It's extra cost to ourselves. So look, it's just a table there. And I suppose to point out, meal-fed lambs will die out 1 to 2% greater than our grass-fed lambs. So important to remember that. Ewe lambs will kill out again greater percentage than our ram lambs. The table down below, I suppose, just it's a rough guide pre-weaning what you expect. 48% in those younger lambs 14 weeks or more, 46%, and then as you go after weaning and into late summer, it'll drop back to 45 and even 43%, and perhaps lower depending on the type of lamb later in autumn or winter. And so, look, that's all I want to say on it at this stage. Andy will take you through the selection of lambs and the process.
Right. We've all these pre-weighed or pre-checked out. We've 5 different types of lambs here. We've lambs that are 55 kilo. We've a group of lambs, 2 lambs in 46 kilo. We've lambs in at 39, and we've another group that would probably look light enough looking, but they're actually 43 kilo. And we've 2 light kind of store type lambs. So this lad here that we're looking at, he's what we'd probably classify as what the factory's looking for. He's running in at about 46 kilos. Is that what it's showing up? Now, it's not all about weight either when you're looking at lambs. The other thing maybe just to talk about, these are all ewe lambs. If they're maybe wether lambs or ram lambs, cover could be a problem, especially maybe the more bred type lambs that's in it, because they'd be leaner type lambs. So you also want to check, have the cover. It's no use sending in, let's say, 46 kilo lambs into the factory and they're not killing out with a good fat cover. The factories don't want that either. So you have to get the balance right. You often hear, let's say middling wet weather after weaning, lot of factory lambs, or even when the price is dropping down, a lot of lambs going in underfinished. And the factory depends if you're well known the factory that, but they might let in a batch of lambs, maybe an odd one, they'll give you the price. But if there's a lot coming in, they'll just hammer you on price. So instead of getting what you're maybe hoping to get, let's say at the minute, maybe between $4.60 a kilo, they might drop you back 50 or 60 cents on the head, and really you're hit on the double there. You've sent a good lamb in, slightly underfinished, maybe he might only take an extra week or 2 to put the cover on him, but you've got caught. We've another lamb here, and it's just maybe it's happening, and you just maybe meal feeding at the minute, maybe not going through your lambs, and you're selling into a processor. Your market isn't actual. The yellow lad there. Your market isn't a butcher lamb. You're sending into a factory. At the minute, they're only paying you for 21, as Shane said. Later on the year, as the weight increases, fair enough. But he's at 50 kilos. If you take that fella at, let's say, at 45% kill out, he'll be probably killing out at about 23 kilos. Now, I haven't it done up. If he was a 55 kilo lamb, he'd be killing out at a 25 kilo lamb. So the 4 kilos there that you're wasted, if they're only paying at 21 kilos, if you're going into the factory. If you take there, a lamb is putting on about 1 kilo a week on good grass, that's 4 weeks. He's too far on the farm. Now again, you have to look at the cover. If he's not covered, the other options there that you can do if you have a batch of lambs like that would be, fair enough, you have pushed them on, they're on the farm, would be to maybe pull them out and bring them to the mart. There's plenty of butchers out there sourcing those type of lambs. So you have options still, as long as they're not going too fat, you have plenty of options there. As bad as lambs, let's say, going into a factory underfinished, later on in the year, if they're going over fat, they're not really wanted either. Because you can imagine if you're buying a piece of meat that there's too much fat on, you don't want to eat it either. So they're getting it hard to sell that product. Right, that's that's a lamb at 43 kilos. If you take him at 45% kill out at this time of year after weaning, you're looking at about 19.5 kilo dead weight. Now, if he's on, let's say, grass only later on, maybe in a month's time of that, they might be only killing out at about 43%. He'd be backing down to 18.5 kilos. So there is more potential to put on that lamb. So, you mean, if you're trying to maximise what you can get off the lamb, and assuming that the price isn't falling week on week, you'd probably hold him on and try and maximise what you can get off that lamb. There's still, a kilo a week at 19.5. There's probably another 2 weeks left on that lad or that girl. Again, the big thing is to check cover. There's some of these lambs, they are the weight, but they haven't the cover on the animal. All right. Will we look at one of the shore lambs then? Now, that's, I suppose, this part of the country, especially where I come from, we're probably looking at a lot more of these type of lambs on farms still. He's hovering around 33, 34 kilos, or she is. She's a nice lamb, probably half a couple, maybe, if it's coming from this part of the country, maybe a slightly later lamb in that. The rule of thumb for every kilo that animal is at weaning, so every kilo heavier at weaning, you have a week, especially if you're using grass, a week less to finish. So if you're going to put these lambs onto grass, this type of lamb, at 33 kilos, you have a long time if you're going to give grass only, and more than likely later on in the year, you're going to have to put meal into them if you want to finish them. Like to bring them up to 46, 47 kilos, you have 10, 12 weeks to put it on. And as you know, at the minute, grass is good if you have good aftergrass. If you're putting it back onto Midland type grass, instead of getting the kilo a week, you're probably back down to 0.8 per kilo. The other option is to bring in a bit of meal. So if you take a meal at 300 grams a day, on good grass, you'll give them 1.5 kilos a week. On poor quality grass, you probably just maintain the kilo. So there is options there, but that type of lamb will take a lot longer. If you're going to grass only, you're looking at, let's say, 10 weeks. Where are we now? We're in the middle of August now, or middle of July, so you have 2 weeks. You'll probably look at then the September. If you have a lot of those type of lambs, you're going to have a lot of grass tied up with those sheep. And maybe you might want to start thinking about the ewe then at that stage. Okay. Yep. Any questions?
I suppose, do you have any questions for Andy before we go on and maybe cover the final bit of the lambs? We'll hold them to the end. Look, I suppose, thanks Andy, that was on the selection of lambs, what lambs you select, and there are a few important things to remember when selecting their lambs. What affects the weight of a lamb going into the scales? What environmental effects there? Is number one, is a day like today, are they wet or are they dry? It can be up to 1 kilo of difference, lambs coming into the field very wet. Number two is, how long are they in the yard? Had you them in the yard, dosing, treating feet, foot baths and whatever else, and you say to go have the dinner, you got held up, and it's 3 hours later you're coming back. There will be a difference there. Do you weigh them in the morning? Do you weigh them in the evening? It's just important things to remember when you're selecting lambs. If you're in a routine, and you maybe sometimes then you select lambs and they're heavy, and suddenly when you get your returns back from the factory, you say they didn't kill out as well, and those things are important. And going back to the scales as well is very important to keep tabs on that. That's what you look, I suppose, things to watch out for when weighing lambs, the practical things out there. The next thing is, I suppose, a lot of people in this area are in lamb producer groups and sending lambs maybe on a deal. So you're paid in quality as well as weight. So what are you looking for there? Andy alluded to it earlier. You're wanting your well-fleshed lamb, your lamb that's coming into condition score 3 rather than your 2, killing out of 2. We don't want those. The other thing is you want lambs that are grading well. And I suppose just maybe we'll demonstrate here, and we'll maybe take I'm not picking in any breeds or anything else, but it's just 2 lambs of similar Suffolk lamb. Here, what are we looking for in the lamb? Ideally, we want or and U grade. Ideally, U grade in lambs, if at all possible, and that's probably in most lamb producer groups where we're getting paid the most for. So what we're wanting to start off with, basically what we want, imagine our carcass hanging up. We want like a rectangular box, starting off at the shoulder, it's square, coming down and square at the end and filling out the end like a box. That's ideally what we want. So as close to as possible to that. So what's the difference between the U grading lamb and our O grading lamb starting off, or what we should look for? Basically at the shoulder, we should have a good shoulder here. We shouldn't have a pointy shoulder. This particular lamb, we have that just here, across there if you get it. And as you go back, you want a good firm back across. Go to the back that he's not falling away here at the back end. And then at the back end that he's full. That is full. And this particular lamb is falling away badly here, and at the shoulder he's very sharp, and that's probably your R grading lamb there. If this lamb was the weight, just going on condition across here, he's a fat score 2 hanging up, and the kill out percentage of that would be a lot poor compared to some of the other lambs. And maybe if we take this lamb here, if we compared, just again, if you compared the shoulder, there's a good wide shoulder across there. He holds it across the back, and again at the end, he doesn't fall away, and a good round end here. So that look is important. Going back to Eamon's talk earlier, when you're selecting your ram, that ram will throw a lot of those traits into the lamb, and that's what you need to be looking for. Starting off at the front, this is your rectangular box starting off here. It's good and square the whole way back and folds it out well. The other thing I suppose is, I had it up on the last slide there, is transporting these lambs and handling the lambs before they go to slaughter. And this is a problem if you visit a factory and have the chance of visiting it and look at some of the lambs hanging up, the problems which happens. And I suppose, look, it's from our own not knowing rather than intentionally causing it. In handling the lamb when you're weighing them, or in picking them out that morning and transporting them, is that basically the lamb is caught around the neck and somewhere along here, that you're not abusing the lamb or pulling at the lamb. The last thing is you want to do is pull the wool anywhere along here and catch the lamb there. What happens there is you pull the wool and pull the skin and you bruise. It's I suppose bad enough doing it up at the shoulder, but if you're doing it anywhere near at the end from here back, you're affecting the deer's cut on the lamb. This is your deer's cut from here back, so you don't want to affect that. The other thing with it, I suppose important to point out, if you're vaccinating lambs, or if there's a lamb needs to be injected with antibiotics, ideally if it's into the muscle, it happens in the neck, that you're away from the deer's cut. And if you're giving your clostridial vaccinations, that is up here in the neck, that you're not giving it along here where you can damage the lamb or affect some of the deer's cuts. So that's important, just a few important pointers on it. The last thing I want to cover is the actual dispatch docket, and some of the factors coming back and telling us, if you're in, and I suppose we would advise anybody sent to the factories, is avail of the extra 5 or 10 cent that is there for quality assurance. But in actually completing the dispatch documentation, it's important to tick the boxes that you have that lamb resident, if he is resident on the farm from birth, and is more than 42 days there, to avail of your quality assurance bonus. So look, that's just, and to sign the documentation on the back as well of the new dispatch documents. So it's just an important point, I suppose, to take you from selecting your lambs, getting them correct weight, number 2, and the correct type of lamb. Number 3 is when you're transporting them, they're not overcrowded and they're not abused or that you haven't damaged carcasses. And number 4, that you fill out the documentation correctly and avail of the quality assured bonus there and have it correct going in. So, Frank, I think we can take any questions.
That's great, Shane. Thank you very much. And I didn't introduce you to Andy. My apologies, Andy. I should have introduced. Andy is an advisor in Westport, and I want to thank you very much for your wisdom and your advice there, Andy, as well. Thank you very much. Listen, we'll take at this stage. We can take a couple of questions. Anybody have any questions for either Andy or Shane before we move on to the final topic of the morning? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do that. Don't worry. I'll remind them. Just. I'm getting a nudge here from Peter to remind me. The last few minutes are available for anybody to sign on that hasn't done so. If you don't sign on the next few minutes, you won't be able to do so again. So I just would encourage you to go. I would also say, I mean, there's a number of people standing around in the wings as well that don't, and there are seats. So maybe if anybody looking for a seat, there are some seats available all the time. So I'm just for the final session.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Okay, listen, thanks Andy and Shane. Okay, we're now moving on to the final topic, and the final topic is to do with flock health. We're looking at both abortions and lameness control in sheep. With us we have Fergal Morris, who is a vet with MSD, and I want to thank Fergal for coming here. So I will hand it over to you, Fergal, and we'll take it from there. Okay, thank you very much. If we could have your attention, again, please, and maybe please take your seats for the final session.
Okay, thanks, Frank. I think we'll kick off at this stage. In terms of abortion in sheep, we'll just look at the different causes. The non-infectious causes you're aware of: pregnancy, toxemia, stress. But the most common causes are infectious, and if you look at it, Toxoplasmosis and enzootic abortion make up more than 50% of the causes. There are other causes. We've seen Salmonella, Campylobacter, listeriosis associated with silage. Lepto can cause problems in sheep as well, in the same way that it can cause problems in cattle. And Schmallenberg, we might talk about that at the end. There was an expectation that we'd see more cases this year, but there were very, very few throughout the country. But we might talk about that at the end. Just in terms of the incidence, you can see from 2006 through to 2012, these are the regional vet lab reports in Ireland. You can see toxo is always the most common one, and enzootic abortion varies. But if you look at this in the UK, enzootic abortion is by far the most common cause. And enzo and toxo make up 75% of the causes in the UK. This may actually be underdiagnosed. It's only in the last few years that the laboratories have started to look for it. So the incidence actually may be underdiagnosed. If you do have abortions, what should you do? The one thing you should always assume is that it is infectious. And also remember, most of the bacterial or most of the causes that we have here are zoonotic, which means that they infect humans. So if you look at it, toxoplasmosis can cause problems in humans, enzootic, salmonella, campylobacter, listeriosis, lepto, all of those cause issues in humans. So just be very careful when you're handling the samples. And I'd always use gloves. Just make sure that you use gloves when you're handling these, any animals that have aborted. Isolate the ewe because they are extremely infectious. With enzootic abortion, they really can cause infection to all the rest of the flock, as well as to yourself and the rest of the family. Send the samples to the lab. Always take the fetus and the placenta and send that to the lab. You can take blood samples up to about a month after lambing as well. After they've aborted, and in that situation you can get results from blood samples. Not commonly done, but it is actually very effective. Definitely dispose of the infectious material. Use gloves as well because of the infectious nature of it. Disinfect and identify or tag the ewes. I like Michael's idea earlier on where he talked about cutting the edge off the tag. That's certainly an option too, but definitely try and identify these, because if you've got enzootic abortion, you cannot keep these because they can remain as a source of infection for the rest of the flock. So looking at the actual cycle with toxoplasmosis. Toxoplasmosis is spread by cats, and it's young cats are the problem. They shed huge quantities of cysts in their feces, and they'll spread it into the feed of the animals in particular, in the feed of the ewes. So it's young cats are the real issue, but what you should do in the long run is try and keep an older cat on the farm. Castrated older cat will actually keep out the younger animals from the farm, and that will help to reduce the incidence. But it's virtually impossible to keep cats off a farm. Neighbouring animals will travel and they'll defecate in the animal's feed and cause infection. Toxoplasmosis is extremely common and almost impossible to get rid of it. Cats will become immune after about 8 days infection, but it's these young cats that are the problem. They shed it into the bedding or in the feed. The ewes become infected during pregnancy, and there's a big difference in the timing of infection. If you look at it in early pregnancy, you'll get resorption, so you just get a barren ewe. Mid-pregnancy, you get these mummified lambs, and one live lamb, one dead lamb is often quite common with toxo. If you have one live lamb, one dead lamb, very often that's toxoplasmosis that's causing the problem. And in late pregnancy, you can just get stillbirths, weak lambs, or just abortion as well. Enzootic abortion is very different. This is really a disease of bought-in sheep. If you're buying in sheep, you really, really should consider vaccination to prevent enzootic abortion. It's very, very contagious. And we've seen abortion storms with 40-50% of the ewes aborting. What happens initially is you get late abortions from the ewes that are bought in. They tend to infect the lambs, and those lambs actually can remain infected until their next pregnancy. And it's only at about 90 days of pregnancy that suddenly this time bomb goes off. So it's called latent infection. And that's a big, big problem with enzootic abortion, that the ewe can infect the lambs and infect other sheep as well that it comes in contact with. And this latent infection only causes problem then at the next pregnancy. So with enzootic abortion, you buy in the replacements, several abort at their first lambing, infection spreads to the rest of the flock, and it's the next year then that you can often see this abortion storm with more than 25% of the ewes aborting. And the abortion rate then settles down after that to about 5 or 10%. And it's worth bearing in mind, if you vaccinate with Toxovax, you'll get very solid immunity. But one of the problems you can have with enzootic abortion is that when you vaccinate, the animals may have got infected prior to vaccination, so that they can abort subsequently. That's just something worth bearing in mind. So again, just in terms of the timing, you've got lambing, selecting the breeding ewes. You can vaccinate any time between 3 to 4 weeks before tupping. But between that 3 to 4 week period before tupping, you cannot vaccinate. It's too close to tupping, and don't vaccinate during that period. So make sure you order the vaccine on time, because the likes of Toxo, it's made up to order. So if you order it now, you won't get it for at least a week. And then when you do get it, it actually has a very short shelf life. The shelf life only arrives in with about a 7 to 10 day shelf life. So just bear that in mind. So there's a bit of planning involved. In terms of vaccination with the vaccines, with Toxovax, you may only really need to vaccinate your replacement ewes, because the older ewes will probably have immunity. But I would certainly consider vaccination of the replacements. With enzootic abortion, you may need to do a whole flock vaccination first time round, and then the replacements thereafter. Now, I will warn you, they're not cheap vaccines. You're looking at probably in the region of €5 for Toxovax, and probably €4 for Enzoovax. But they will last basically for the lifetime of the ewe. There's very solid immunity that lasts really for the lifetime of the ewe. So just to summarise, diagnosis is absolutely essential. Try and find out what you have on the farm first. And if you do have enzootic abortion, cull those ewes, because they'll remain as a source of infection for the rest of the flock. If it's toxoplasmosis that caused the abortion, you can actually retain them, because they have very solid immunity after infection. Tox and enzo are associated with at least 50% of the causes, and probably more than that. Vaccinate 4 weeks prior to tupping. With Toxovax, vaccinate the replacements. And enzootic abortion, if you are buying in sheep, consider whole flock vaccination for the first year, and then thereafter all you have to do is vaccinate the replacements. Okay, that's abortion. The second topic I'm going to talk about is lameness. If you look at lameness, the incidence of lameness across nationally is probably about 10%. Most farms will tolerate about 10% lameness in the flock. If you have 10% lameness in your flock, you're probably losing 550 to 650 euros per 100 ewes. It's very costly. For the cost of loss in live weight gain, lameness will cost you about 50 grams per day, up to 50 grams per day loss in live weight gain. You'll get more disease. You'll often have a lot more pasteurella. You'll see more abortions because the sheep are more stressed. So that's a major, major issue with lameness. It's not just the lameness itself, the work involved, the antibiotics, the loss in live weight gain, but it also results in other diseases too because of stress. In terms of the types of lameness that we see in the country, foot rot and scald account for 90% of the causes. They are by far the most common. And with foot rot, you'll see it starting a scald between the two toes, and then it spreads to the under part of the foot. It's very different from digital dermatitis, and we'll look at that in a second. but it's a foul smelling black dead tissue. You'll all be aware of what foot rot looks like. One thing that's really worth bearing in mind, sheep never develop an immune response to natural infection. So they can remain chronically infected, or they get reinfected again and again. It's one major problem with foot rot, and that's why vaccination can work so well. This is digital dermatitis, extremely severe, and you can have a very high incidence of this. 20-30% of the sheep can be affected. It starts with foot rot. Foot rot starts in the bottom of the foot. With digital dermatitis, it actually starts at the coronary band, so where the skin meets the hoof. And it can start as a very small little ulcer at the front or the back. Suddenly it goes all the way around and the hoof falls off. If you have these hooves falling off, that's more than likely digital dermatitis. Now, you will see a higher incidence of digital dermatitis where you've got foot rot as well. So by controlling foot rot, you'll help to reduce the incidence of digital dermatitis. Very commonly associated with bought-in sheep as well. Another good reason to segregate. So when you bring in sheep, try and keep them away from the rest of the flock for about 28 days. If they get infections, treat them with antibiotics and prevent them spreading it to the rest of the flock. Does anybody know what this one is? It's what's known as a toe fibroma. And really what's happened there is it's over-pairing of the toe. And this is very, very common. If you look at it, that's the normal shape of a sheep's foot. So they actually point downwards. I remember giving a demonstration one time on pairing hooves. And I cut the top off the toe and the first two that went through. It's very easy to do it. And if you do that, that's what you get. It's basically scar tissue that forms, extremely painful. And as Michael mentioned earlier on, all that the evidence now suggests is that we should minimize pairing. Only pair if they're severely overgrown. And if they are, make sure you disinfect between handling one sheep and the next, because you will spread the infection from one sheep to the next. But minimize pairing as much as possible. I'll just go through briefly. There's a control program that was put together years ago, and it's very clear in terms of what you need to do. Separate the sheep, examine the feet of all sheep, and pair only the ones where necessary. Separate them, so you've got the main flock and you've got the ones that are infected. Vaccinate both groups, and move to clean grazing every 10 days and foot bath in between. In terms of foot bathing, the types that you can use is copper sulfate, zinc sulfate, and formalin. All work very, very well. And one thing we've seen over the last 10 years is that the cost of all of those have increased 3 to 4-fold, because the likes of copper, zinc, and formalin is a byproduct of oil. All of them have increased a lot in price. So people are considering vaccination. If you've got the infected ones, you can treat with antibiotic, and you can do a more intensive foot bathing regime there. So do it 4 times, 5 days apart. And at the end of that, if you vaccinated, treated with antibiotics, used foot bathing, and you still have severely lame sheep, you should consider culling them, because they're the sheep that remain as a chronic source of infection for the rest of the flock. I mentioned earlier on, once you've got foot rot, sheep never really develop a proper immune response to natural infection. So they remain chronically infected, and that's why culling is an important part of the overall control program. We tend to do this idea of moving them to clean grazing every 10 days because the bacteria that causes foot rot will survive in 2 places. Infected sheep's feet, or it'll survive in soil for about 10 days. So by by separating them every 10 days, by moving them to clean grazing, you'll prevent infection. It's less likely they'll get reinfected. Just one thing in relation to digital dermatitis: if you do have it, talk to your vet. There are very specific antibiotics that you need to treat it. Oxytet, or the likes of amoxicillin, doesn't work particularly well. You may need to use an antibiotic like Mycotil or Nuflora in individual animals, or you may need to use an antibiotic foot bath to try and control it if you have a very large problem. There's a product called Lincocin. It's not specifically licensed for use, but you may need to use it if you've got a very severe problem. And really just to highlight, just to summarize, in terms of the actual way of trying to control lameness, there's a 5-point plan. Quarantine all incoming animals. Vaccinate. And vaccine will actually treat as well as prevent the infection. It's normally a single dose required, and if they still have problems 4 to 6 weeks later, you can give a second dose because it's an oil adjuvanted vaccine. Avoid spread, and you can do this through minimizing of pairing. One time in the 5-point plan, we actually put pairing in here, but now we say leave it out. Treat clinical cases with antibiotics. Oxytet works extremely well for foot rot. If you've got digital dermatitis, you may need to use a different antibiotic. And finally, culling is a very important part of the control program because sheep will remain chronically infected and will spread the infection to the rest of the flock. So at this stage, are there any questions on either abortion or lameness? Or do you want to take questions on all the topics at this stage, Frank?
If we could, I know it's just maybe to facilitate our photographer while people are still in the place. Our photographer wants to take a photograph of all the speakers while the people are still here. So we'll do that and then we can take questions if that's all right, Fergal. That's all right. So if we can do that. Sorry, Fergal, for interrupting you on that. And I think I certainly hope that there should be some very interesting questions I mean, there's some very interesting topics there. So I'll hide this. Hide that there for the moment. They'll never stay down here. They won't stay down here. They won't stay down here. They won't stay out here.
No, come on. Michael,
They'll start going. You better just take it. Just take it. Come in, Michael. Come in. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll hand you back then. You can ask for questions.
Now, can we take any questions at this stage? The question was, do you have to use the foot rot vaccine every year? Some people do. They use it. The most common time to use it is a month either side of tupping. And very often if you're using abortion vaccines, you use those a month before tupping, so you might use it a month after tupping. And a good time to start it is a dry time of the year because the bacteria won't spread. It has